It was said in the last episode that the limbic system in the brain, which is thought to be unconscious or subconscious, is what Yogacara Buddhism calls fruit of same order, and it is type 2b strings in string theory. In order to fully appreciate this, we have to go through specific examples in relation to the neocortex, which is thought to be conscious, is the fruit of functions in Yogacara Buddhism, or type 2a strings in string theory. The limbic system group of interconnected brain structures are said to be responsible for our subconscious or unconscious activities. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, in a Closer to Truth program, said, quote, "The cognitive or psychological unconscious is information that's unconscious simply because it's not part of consciousness. A perfect example of that is the way amygdala processes information, that is the part of the brain I worked on in terms of emotion and fear in particular. It can receive information and produce emotional responses and even learn independent of what the neocortex is doing, which is required for consciousness. So the amygdala is an unconscious emotional process or an emotional learning system that lives below the radar of consciousness. Not because it was anxious and the consciousness shipped the amygdala down below. It's just where it is and the consciousness doesn't have access to that." Unquote. Basically, neuroscientists put the amygdala and or the entire limbic system's functions into the unconscious or subconscious category where the neocortex is responsible for our consciousness. Whether the thalamus, a very important part of the brain, should be included in the limbic system is highly debatable. Some definitions exclude it, where others, such as the Cleveland Clinic website, includes it. The definition says, "Your thalamus is your body's information relay station. All information from your body's senses, except smell, must be processed through your thalamus before being sent to your brain's cerebral cortex for interpretation. Your thalamus also plays a role in sleep, wakefulness, consciousness, learning, and memory. We shall see why thalamus should be included. But the thalamus is not a relay station, as explained before in an earlier episode. Reality as we experience are like successive movie frames, where each frame doesn't stay for a split second and vanishes before the next frame arises. Hence, everything in three-dimensional space is useless and has no effect. That is why the thalamus is not a relay station. Let's see some examples of fruit of same order, which are functions of the limbic system. 1. You drove home from work. Suddenly you realized you had arrived home, but couldn't remember the details, such as the intersections during that trip. 2. When you enter a room with a familiar smell, which you don't notice at all. 3. You don't have any special feeling of touch while sitting on a familiar sofa. 4. You aren't frightened by the rope in the walkway when you walked by. 5. The clock in the kitchen had been moved from the right wall to the left a few months ago, but you looked to the right every time you wanted to look at the clock. 6. Performing a skill or a task which you have learnt. 7. You don't feel the hardness of the stool while sitting on it. 8. You are performing a task inattentively. Thalamus should be included because the above are all activities of first seven consciousness or seven heart realm, which include eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, except they are also unconscious or subconscious. Hence thalamus is not a relay station, but part of fruit of same order or first seven consciousness. In order to appreciate, we have to understand the equivalence of the above examples in terms of fruit of functions, which is in the neocortex or the conscious. 1. First few days, you drove home from your new workplace and noticed all the details, such as the intersections. 2. When you entered a room with an unfamiliar smell and started to get used to it. 3. You sat on the new sofa and started to notice the feeling of touch. 4. You were frightened by the ropes in the walkway initially, but learned that they are just ropes. 5. The clock in the kitchen had been moved from the right wall to the left a few months ago, but you looked to the right every time you wanted to look at the clock. Then you look left. 6. Learning a skill or a task. 7. You didn't feel the hardness of the stool while sitting on it until someone asked. 8. You are performing a task attentively. These examples show how fruit of same order, which is manifested in the limbic system, and fruit of functions, which is manifested in the neocortex, are related. This dependency can also be seen in string theory, where there is a duality between type 2b and type 2a. A comment in an earlier episode which states that fruit of same order happens split seconds before fruit of functions is only half of the truth. Fruit of same order, which takes place before, is the basis for fruit of functions to arise, as in example 7, where a person sits on a stool unaware of the hardness until being asked. The sequence is the reverse for example 6, when learning a new skill, only after which a learnt skill can be performed subconsciously. This is called fruit of functions perfuming the seeds in the eighth consciousness for them later to arise as fruit of same order.